Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. It's Monday, the 23rd of December here in London. I'm Caroline Hepker. Coming up today, the UK economy unexpectedly flatlines as Starmer's growth ambitions appear to be in need of resuscitation. Honda and Nissan look to finalise a merger agreement. And picking fights pre-presidency, Panama's leader rejects Donald Trump's threat to reimpose US control over the Panama Canal. Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. The UK economy failed to grow in the third quarter, according to revised estimates that suggest that the slowdown since the Labour Party took office has been sharper than previously thought. GDP was unchanged in 3 months to September, according to data from the Office for National Statistics. That is a downgrade from their previous estimate of 0.1% growth. Economists had expected no revision. The figures deliver a further blow to Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who came to power promising to boost jobs and living standards. Instead, the economy has weakened dramatically after outpacing all of its group of 7 peers in the first half of 2024. The grim economic data comes as UK businesses say that they expect their activity will fall noticeably in the months ahead. Bloomberg's Tiwa Adebayo has more.
A steep decline. That's what awaits the country's private sector activity in 2025, says the Confederation of British Industry. According to the group's latest growth indicator survey, all 3 major sectors are expecting volumes to fall in the first quarter, with manufacturers' expectations at their weakest since May 2020. Businesses say they plan to respond by cutting headcount sharply. Hiring tensions are at their weakest in over 4 years. The bleak outlook from UK employers shows the scale of the challenge facing Rachel Reeves as she seeks to turn around economic sentiment. It comes after the Chancellor's tax-raising October budget was widely criticised by the business community for jeopardising growth. In London, Tiwa Adebayo, Bloomberg Radio.
Now, Honda and Nissan are in talks to finalise a merger agreement as soon as June, with plans to create a holding company. The merged company would be led by a president chosen by Honda, with the aim of completing the merger in 2026. The merger is seen as a response to the challenges faced by both companies, particularly Nissan, which is struggling with declining sales and profits. President-elect Donald Trump's trade threats and diplomatic efforts are causing turmoil globally. In the latest example, Trump is claiming the Panama Canal is charging the US exorbitant prices and rates of passage, and he's demanding lower fees or else. Here's Trump speaking earlier in Phoenix, Arizona.
The fees being charged by Panama are ridiculous, highly unfair, especially knowing the extraordinary generosity that has been bestowed to Panama, I say very foolishly, by the United States. This complete ripoff of our country will immediately stop.
Trump's diplomatic hardball less than a month before his inauguration represents a new front in his attempt to ratchet up pressure on trading partners. In a video statement, Panama's President José Raúl Mulino rebuffed Donald Trump's threat.
Every square meter of the Panama Canal and its surroundings belongs to Panama and will continue to be. The sovereignty and the independence of our country are non-negotiable.
Panama's president, speaking there via a translator, writing on Truth Social, Trump hit back saying, quote, "We'll see about that." Meanwhile, President-elect Trump has also been fighting claims he has ceded the presidency to billionaire advisor Elon Musk. Here's what he told that event in Phoenix.
No, he's not taking the presidency. I like having smart people. You know, they're on a new kick. Russia, 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 Ukraine, 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 all the different hoaxes. And the new one is, President Trump has ceded the presidency to Elon Musk. No, that's not happening.
Trump's decision to address Musk's power is testimony to the influence of the world's richest man. Trump appointed the Tesla CEO to head a cost-cutting and deregulation effort while the two men came together to try to block a deal to temporarily fund the US government. After failing to get enough votes for an alternative, a slimmed-down version of the original bill was passed, preventing a government shutdown in the US before Christmas. Now, lastly, a judge has ordered a pre-trial detention for the man suspected of driving a car into a German Christmas market in the city of Magdeburg 2 days ago. The suspect, a 50-year-old doctor of Saudi Arabian origin, was taken into custody on Friday evening. Christian Pagel is the Interior Minister for the German state where the man originally lived. He says that he had been previously flagged to German authorities.
The suspect threatened to do something that would attract international attention. He referred in this context to the attack in Boston, the Boston Marathon in 2013. Subsequently, a warrant was issued to search the flat of the suspect. No evidence of any kind was found that would indicate actual preparations to commit such an act.
Christian Pagel, the Interior Minister for the German state of Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania, speaking for our translator there. A 9-year-old child and 4 women were killed in the incident, which left more than 200 people injured. And those are our top stories for you this morning. In a moment, we're going to be discussing the war of words between President Donald Trump and Panama's president over the Panama Canal. But first, I want to get to the UK GDP data. The figures flatlined in the third quarter, according to the new figures that were released this morning from the ONS. It is another blow, it seems, for the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. Joining me now to discuss is Bloomberg's Markets Today reporter Dave Goodman, really to discuss the latest GDP numbers. Is it worse than what we had been expecting?
On a headline basis, it's certainly worse. Previously, it was estimated that the UK economy had grown 0.1% in the third quarter. I mean, that's not great, but it's growth. Now the revisions have come in and they're showing that there was no growth at all, that the economy basically flatlined. Going further back, growth for the second quarter was also downgraded very slightly from 0.5 to 0.4. So overall, the picture of the economy is not good. And I think you can think of this a couple of ways. Obviously, it's an embarrassment for Reeves and the Labour Party to come in their first quarter of growth see essentially nothing at all, and especially when the government came in and made so much about them being a growth kind of related mission. I think the other way, though, is like it was their first quarter in power. Arguably, there's not that much you can do. Historically, if you look at the data, the economy tends to overperform going into an election and then will slightly dip after that. And also, like the general trend of the UK economy, this is what it is, right? It's very low growth, maybe a little bit of growth. We had that data got a bit messier because we had the very mild recession at the end of 2023, and then that led to a strong rebound at the start of 2024. So some of these comparisons about going from the strongest in the G7 to one of the weakest, they're all a timing thing. Growth is always a timing call, right? So you're looking at the reason we did so well in the first half of this year was because the second half of last year wasn't great. So you get these weird variations in the data.
Ebbs and flows,
but the overall picture of the UK economy is something we've talked about in this studio for years. I think that that it is really stuck in this low growth trap. And I think that's what successive governments have tried to find ways to get out of, but that's not going to happen straight away. But it does kind of show that any government coming in with a kind of growth agenda is always in the struggle. And we kind of talked about that a bit even in the run of the election, that this was a very lofty goal to set. Yeah,
although you are perhaps rightly giving the government the benefit of the doubt. On the other hand, there was a big slump in business and consumer confidence, that some people blamed on the language that the government was using. And now this new survey showing that businesses say that activity is expected to fall in 2025. So again, quite gloomy.
Yeah, very much. I think the third quarter, I was talking more about the third quarter, so the fourth quarter obviously included the budget, the tax rises. So that's the stuff that Labour really have to own, I think. I think the third quarter, a bit less than maybe, but the fourth quarter, obviously the budget was at the end of October. We had the run-up to the budget where we saw consumer confidence falling off. Now we're seeing business confidence and kind of general sentiment from business being very negative. So I think that from this point onwards, this is something that is going to be a problem. I think on the survey data and what we're seeing from people like the CBI this morning, it is very interesting that they are so downbeat, because if you think that in the summer, business was really welcoming Labour. They were saying, this is great. We've got stability. We've got political stability after years of chaos. And that picture has changed very quickly, basically on the back of one tax, I think, from what you can see. So it's a decision that I'm not sure whether Reeves would take back. She didn't have very many options. There are not very much she could do in order to kind of reset the public finances. But it's obviously something that's caused a great degree of concern within the economy and within businesses. So
and you're talking about the national insurance
tax
increase.
Sector. Yeah, I mean, there are other ways to raise money, but they would have involved clearly breaking the manifesto pledge. So she'd kind of backed herself into a corner during the election, and now this is the kind of follow through from that.
How fair is it to talk or think about stagflation for the UK?
I mean, I think if you look at the data, it's pretty fair right now. We had no growth in the third quarter. In the latest monthly figures for October showed actually a slight downgrade and negative growth, and inflation is ticking back up again. I mean, so classically that is where we are. I mean, again, it's where we've been for a long time there. Like in the tail end of last year, we had actually a technical recession, and we had, again, inflation was still fairly high at that point. So we've been stuck in that trap for a long time. I think what's different now is that we had all this optimism about inflation, about rate cuts, about growth. Mm-hmm. And in the last 6 months, they've all taken a hit in some ways. I think the one thing to watch now is whether this kind of the quite slow, low, disappointing growth picture starts to feed into what the Bank of England thinks. We saw that a bit come through last week in the meeting on Thursday with the people who were talking about wanting to cut rates. The three members of the MPC, the Bank of England held rates, of course, but 3 people voted for immediate cut. They were all talking about weakening demand. They kind of stopped looking. They were a bit less concerned about the inflation picture because that's very much a predicted thing where things like energy prices have an obvious impact. But if it is clear that the UK economy is really struggling, that might mean that the Bank of England has to do more next year, which conversely then gives growth a bit of a boost. It's always it's a very weird dynamic you have going on where you can kind of
it's very uncertain, isn't it? For 2025, it's perhaps going to be very uncertain for the Bank of England, as perhaps it is also with the ECB and the Fed. So maybe next year is also going to have a lot of surprises for us. Yeah, and if you think where we were this time last year, we were thinking there were going to be 6 cuts from the BOE. We got 2. Yes. Now there's barely 2. Could we get 6? Is it that kind of thing where just everything overcorrects in December? That would certainly make it very interesting for us and for markets. Dave, thank you so much for being with me this morning. Bloomberg's Markets Today reporter, David Goodman, thank you for your time. Well, Panama's president has rejected Donald Trump's threat to reimpose US control over the Panama Canal. It's our other big story this morning. Let's bring in Bloomberg editor Jill Desis for more on this. Jill, good morning. Trump appears concerned about China's involvement in managing some trade through the canal. What has Panama's president been saying? The real-world impact of this feud, what could it be?
Yes, so there's a few things at play here I think are kind of important as we explore the nuances. So essentially, the first part of Trump's complaints boils down to, he says that the fees associated with traveling through the Panama Canal, the U.S. is the largest customer really here. He says they're too exorbitant. That's something that Panama's president ultimately, said that the shipping tolls weren't inflated. So he's certainly pushing back on that aspect. And then, yes, the second one is more of this geopolitical aspects here. So Trump essentially claiming that countries like China are asserting greater and greater influence and ultimately control over the Panama Canal, and that's what's ultimately leading to his threat. So what the Panamanian president is saying is that that's not how this is. He said, quote, every square meter of the Panama Canal and its adjacent zones is part of Panama, and it would continue to be. So certainly refuting on that point, but I mean, if you kind of try to connect the dots here in terms of what Trump is complaining about, there are certain levels of influence along the canal. While China doesn't control the canal, there is a Chinese company. It's a subsidiary of a Hong Kong-based company that actually has 2 of the 5 ports adjacent to the canal. Perhaps that's something that Trump is, taking issue with here. In terms of real-world implications here, you asked, Caroline, I mean, what we've already seen over the course of the last several weeks, Trump isn't even president yet, but he's really kind of shaken up. A lot of the global order has, sort of lashed out against a variety of nations, about tariffs or sanctions or what have you here, and that has seemed to cause quite a bit of consternation. We're seeing an unfolding political crisis in Canada, for example, on the back of some tariffs that he threatened there. So it does seem like Trump is very poised to sort of shake things up ahead of him returning to the White House in January.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.